everyone, to a new episode of the Haptics Club podcast. I am Ashley from Titan Haptics. I'm joined by the Haptics crew, Manu from Unity, Brian from Sense Glove, and Eric from Razer. The Haptics Club is a team of people that have a passion for haptics. Our goal is to raise awareness of the amazing tech and people happening in the space and foster conversation around it. So many amazing subject matters to cover, so many industries. It's exciting. If you want to learn more about haptics, check out our blog, thehapticsclub.com/blog. You can also get swag. So we've got cups, shirts, tank tops for when the weather gets better at hapticsclub.com/shop. And today we've got two amazing guests. I'm super excited. We've got the co-founders of Afference. You've probably seen their sci-fi looking phantom glove with a neural interface. Exciting stuff. Can't wait to talk about it. Ooh, he's showing it off. If you're listening, he's showing it off. It's super cool. And be sure to visit thehapticsclub.com to check out our latest everything. Our guests coming up. We've got an amazing season. We're just excited to kick it off this time. But that's so much intro. Let's jump right in. I want to welcome Jacob Segil, and her co-founder of Afference, and Dustin Tyler, co-founder of Afference. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Good to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having us. Good to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you here. To kick things off, so people will have a better understanding, like who you guys are, what's your background, what do you do? Jacob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just kind of like how you're here, what your role is?
Yeah, of course. Great to be here, Ashley. Thanks for having us. Jacob Segil, I'm co-founder and CEO of Afference. I've been a serial entrepreneur for 10 years, as well as an academic researcher in the field of prosthetic limb design and neural interfaces. What I like to do is take ideas, inventions, and get them out there to let people enjoy them or use them. My prior work has been in medical devices and prosthetic limb componentry. But what you'll hear more about today is that we've leveraged a lot of that work, right, to create a new haptic interface. The Phantom is our first, development kit here to share with you all in this industry, and we'll tell you a lot more about how it interfaces to the nervous system and how our work on prosthetics informed all those techniques. It's been a great fun working with Dustin for maybe a decade here. Afference is the new adventure for us. We founded the company only 18 months ago, so it's just starting here, and happy to tell you more.
Awesome. Dustin, jump right in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ashley. It's great to be here, and I, listen to many of the podcasts. It's great stuff you guys talk about. It's a thrilling area, actually. My background, I've been in academia pretty much most of my career. I spent a couple of years in industry for medical devices, but I'm a neural engineer by training. And so I've spent my entire career looking at how we can stimulate and activate the nervous system in various ways and develop technology that we started out in preclinical trials on a lab bench and moved all the way into human use for prosthetics in particular. And so a lot of this we'll talk about, we'll get more into the details, I'm sure, as we discuss through. But about 15 years ago, we started working with people with limb loss. And one of the big things is when you lose a limb, you lose a sense of touch. And, I like to tell everybody I'm a recovering engineer. And what I mean by that is when I started the whole haptics area, I thought about how the hand was going to be better, the functions going to be better, and everything else. But having spent a lot of time with our subjects and talking to them and hearing what it really means for them to get the sense of touch back, I realized that haptics isn't so much about function. It's important, but it's about connection. It is the thing that connects us to people. It's the thing that connects us to devices. It's what really connects us to the world around us. And so what I learned from that in the prosthetics, even in that arena when people had a physical hand, it was a prosthesis, it was a physical device, it was still virtual to them because they didn't have that sense of touch. And as soon as we turned it on, they gained touch. And that was really the jumping point to like, there's a whole lot of bigger effort here and things we can do. And that's what's really led to this Afference and working with Jacob to try and figure out, not so much in the prosthetics world, but seeing how the bigger opportunity in virtual augmented reality, gaming, and every place that people are using technology, but becoming isolated because technology, while it brings far people closer to us, it makes close people further away. And a lot of that's because we don't have interaction, right? And so how can we use haptics to connect to objects, connect to the virtual world, those type of things? And that's where my expertise and background is. And we're super excited to be using these new approaches to providing haptics to bring this forward.
Oh, that's super exciting. That's so well said. I love it. That was a great summary. So very true. I think let's jump because we want to dive deep into the area of expertise really quick because I think, Jacob, you're wearing this demo. Can we just just go straight to this, like give us kind of like the 101. Tell us about, because I want to like preface this as well before we talk about it, because this type of technology I think is kind of akin to magic in some ways. It's like magnetism. It's like there's something happening that isn't really explainable to like the kind of general public, because it does work like magic. So talk us through kind of like the interface, and then talk us through a little bit deeper of how it works, and then we'll kind of go kind of more into that.
Yeah, great. I can describe what I'm wearing here today, for those of you listening, and then I'll have Dustin dive into the neuroscience for what's actually going on inside of your both peripheral nervous system and your brain, and then I'll tell you what we're planning to do right with this technique here at Afference. So today, what we've built so far is this. We call this the Phantom. What I have on my hand right now is 5 rings on my fingers. These have contacts on the inner surfaces, right, touching my skin, and then I have electronics here on my wrist. It looks like a large smartwatch that houses the right Bluetooth, battery, processing, and stimulation circuitry. So what we can do today with this wearable is that we can pair interactions in 3D space um, to sensations that you're feeling here. And what's unique is that you can tell, or you can imagine, that there's nothing touching my skin, right? I don't have an actuator or I don't have any motor, right, that's pressing on my skin, but my brain is still feeling something touching my finger. And the magic there, and the unique sort of offering that we're bringing to the table here, is that this is what we're doing here is direct neural stimulation. That means we're targeting the gross nerve fascicles, and we can put together a vocabulary list for those of you listening if you need. But what we're trying to say is that we're skipping the skin. The skin typically is where haptic information arrives. It creates mechanical energy on your skin, which transduces it into electrical, and we're bypassing that step. So we're going straight to the nerve itself. We're creating electrical energy inside of that nerve. It goes to the brain, and you feel something. And so our first offering looks like this. These are the dev kits that we're preparing for our first partners. And then we have ideas for how to take it into other form factors like rings and watches.
Yeah, so I mean, so go from the neuroscience and where we're at. So the interesting piece, and I think probably your audience is a pretty good idea. So I don't want to get um, too necessarily insulting, but I'll go kind of basic just for those that maybe don't know. As Jacob was saying, our hands, right? We have like 17,000 little mechanical sensors that exist in the hand, and those 17,000 are divided into different classes, right? Some respond to rapid movement, some respond to like slow, constant things. All those sensors are connected through the nerves, right? So what happens at our fingers results in pulses in these wires that essentially go up to our brain. And while a lot of the technology is trying to work at the sensor itself and the mechanics of the skin, we bypass that, as Jacob said. And the ultimate idea is, how do I put the same information on that wire directly? It's as though you have a telephone line without the telephone on it, for those old enough to remember when you actually had corded phones. But we can tap into that. And the beauty is then I don't require the skin, right? And so when we use this technology, there's two sides to it. One is I don't need to put it on the fingers, as Jacob was showing, which means that it's transparent eventually to the user, or they can be using their hand to do other tasks, which when you start thinking about the augmented reality opportunities, or in fact, just wearing this every day while you're going about your everyday life, but want to add haptics to that, you want to have your hand free, right? And so this idea of how do we reduce friction for the user? Like, I don't want to have to wear a glove every day, but if I have a ring, which most of us wear, something that we are wearing every day, then we're connected all the time. So haptics becomes, not just what I touch with my hand, but how I interact with it digitally through the world as well. And so we're beginning to, just like I have earphones in and you're picking up my voice with the microphone and I'm looking at a screen, right? These are our interactions today, and we wear headphones all the time. We have that connection. We want to make haptics that same sort of ubiquitous wearing in what we're doing. And so by going directly to the nerve, we can do that, because I can now just use electrical pulses I put on the nerve, and that goes up to the brain, and then we feel it as though it was on our hand, even though it wasn't. And so We'll talk, I mean, sure, we'll get more into this, like the details of how we do that and what we are allowed to do because of that, as opposed to other approaches. I'm sure we'll talk more about as we go through, but we
Yeah.
find that that's the unique thing to reduce user friction, to basically make it a part of you without actually being something that's, put on, you wear it. It's just part of your daily life, and that's what we want to really achieve is a low friction, sort of ubiquitous part of your everyday life with our haptics.
Awesome. I love the term ubiquitous. Yes, yes, yes. That's super exciting, and appreciate that explanation. That really makes it easy for like anyone to understand. You mentioned, and I know anytime I mention something like electrical, I show anything with wires. I've carried some dev kits, and Jacob had seen it where it looks suspect. Can you tell me a little in the audience a little bit about like safety around
Mhm.
this area, because this is maybe like a new area for folks as well.
Yeah, so just to make people a little more comfortable, is I spent my entire career doing exactly this. And before we got into wearables like we're doing here, I've been developing class 3 medical devices, implanted electrodes that actually, in our case here, we're stimulating through the skin, and there's a whole lot of things that add to the safety of that. I've spent my career doing this where we put devices directly on the nerve inside the body. And so safety has been sort of part of my DNA, if you will. It's what I've been growing up around. And there's a whole vast literature on how you stimulate and keep the safety aspect of causing damage, etc. And so that's one half of safety. The other isn't a safety factor, but people are very interested in, which is they always get a little freaked out about, is it going to hurt? And I'd like to get into that discussion maybe later in here, is that there's value to pain. Now, we're not producing that. We know how to stay away from it. But there's safety that I'm not worried about. We've spent years in that. It's all designed into the system. And then there's what it feels like and how we manage the feeling. And people confuse them, and they shouldn't. It's basically the safety of the system is well thought out. We've been doing this for years, and we have a much, more rigorous safety standards from we're coming from to what we do here.
Awesome. And in terms of the kind of the other side of that, the magical side of how this works and how it feels, let's talk a little bit about something mentioned on your website, which is like the creating haptic illusions. Can you like talk us through that a little bit? Because I think that's an area we've talked about previously on Haptics Club, but I want to hear kind of like your take on that.
Hmm.
Yeah, sure. It's a what we mean by haptic illusion is that you when you wear the Phantom or the future offerings that we're planning, you'll feel things that are away from the wearable. That means the ring is on your finger and it's located where you wear rings, right down at the MCP joint, and we can create sensation going up to your fingertip, and it's somewhat magical. Your brain has never felt that before because you and me, we don't wear neural interfaces regularly. And so the illusions we can create are sensations from interactions from objects that aren't there using a 3D interfaces through spatial computing, um, and we're creating sensations away from the wearable itself. There are other that's what we're referring to when we talk about haptic illusions. The idea that what we are accustomed to is a haptic sensation coming from a device that's on our skin, and we're offering something different than that. It's the examples I can describe, and we have some YouTube links and stuff to share through our website too. If you check out afference.io, is that we can create these effects, right, where you put you've seen a lot of these demos before too, right? You put your hand in front of a speaker and you feel the music coming out of that speaker, and we're translating the audio information into haptic, and then we're playing it through your fingers so that it feels like that music is it's inside of you, it's in your hand. um, we can do we can do the simplistic pragmatic tasks like clicks of a button. So a big red button has this sort of spring loaded feature. We've all felt it in an arcade game or elsewhere, where you feel some resistance, then it clicks shut. We can create those effects coming through your index finger, and you can feel the sensation grow and release in your finger as you press that virtual button. Or more fantastical ideas. You can right. We have a mobile AR game where you're shooting lasers out of your fingers, defending the Earth from alien invaders, and it's you and I to create an effect like a laser shooting out of your finger. It has movement, right? Moving from the base of your finger out to the tip. It has intensity modulation, so it gets, you can feel it sort of ramp up, zoom, like that. And those are the things that we can do today with these interfaces. And then we have a lot of ideas for how to go further from there.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to add to that fantastical part actually is that um, for all the kind of haptics that press on the finger or utilize the sensors that exist directly, those are your limits, right? I mean, essentially, you're providing that sensation that exists already based on the skin. And so there's pluses and minuses to this, but what it allows us to do is we can create things you can't possibly feel, right? I mean, there's the opportunity to, in fact, add things that your skin doesn't actually produce, right? And so in some ways, there's unique and unusual sensations, but that also is there's unique and unusual sensations. And the interesting part to that, for us as well, is the question of the plasticity that you have in your brain, right? And so you can learn new things. So you can start to think, for example, we always talk about haptics as in replacing touch. But the beauty of this is you can put, say, for example, magnetic sensation in there, or you can put ultrasound as the thing you're doing as your sense. And so by having a direct access to the nerve, we're not limited by the mechanics of the skin. And that has some interesting opportunities that we think we can play with, especially if you're creating games, right? You can create things that don't exist in the real world. That's the beauty of these 3D worlds, right? And sometimes they shouldn't have the same sensation you have in the real world. So you can create these fantastical new experiences that are really difficult to create by any other means.
I love that so much. It's so true. Like, and when it comes to virtual reality or augmented reality, I think the cool part about them is that it is a vision of someone else's world, an idea that they've created that they want to bring to life, and really like how that happens is like through existing technologies or some kind of like you've got to frame it based on some box that you can accomplish. And I think
Hmm.
what's interesting about what you guys are doing is that it's kind of like you're opening up the gambit of what's possible and turning it into something where it's like now you're going to have to innovate on your ideas because it's there's like a wider spectrum of what's actually possible,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
And this is part of what the development's going to be over the next sort of year or so is that, the tools, the knobs that people have to turn in the haptics right now are pretty limited. We know they're limited. They're the basic beginning points, but the technology is now to the point getting developed where I think of this in one way, not to go too far off, but, think about it like an audio engineer. Right. And if you look at what their tools they have all the delays and the reverb and all these other things that really create a sonic experience, right? I mean, you and I don't know your musical background. I can play a note, but I can't make music the same way that somebody that's an expert can. And we're at the point where we're going to get to the haptics where you have the same sort of knobs to turn so you can create these really unique, unusual haptic experiences that are allowed by the electrical approach to this that aren't necessarily allowed by some of the others. So I love the idea, as you brought up, of creating the soundscape, but creating the haptic scape, right? Creating this haptic experience. And just like we know, when you put audio with visual, the experience is so much different, right? I mean, you can evoke emotion, you can evoke things, and now pair that with a haptic experience. It's just going to it's going to richen that experience is what we're really interested in doing and creating the tools for the artists and developers to do that. It's exciting to us to see what they can do because we're engineering hacks, right? I can give you the tools, but I want to work with the artists that can make it do what it can do.
So true. And I think that's one of the interesting things about the current industry, like the landscape of haptic gloves, is you're kind of seeing like everyone takes it at such a different angle and
Hmm.
what their use case is for, what the value brings to the audience. I'd love to know from your perspective of like where you are most excited to see this in, you mentioned like gaming, virtual reality. Maybe you can touch upon like healthcare, kind of like
Hmm.
your origin story, or just like other areas where you're just like, you're super excited about where the potential could be that maybe when you first created this, you were like, I could never have fathomed it.
Yeah, great. I can walk you through our vision here. We see spatial computing as this next age of digital interaction. So what we're watching and participating in is this transformation, right? We started with a personal computer, right? It was 1984. The Macintosh computer was launched with a mouse, right? You would point and click on digital content for the first time. That was when I was born. Then 2007, right, was the launch of the mobile computing era. So that's when Steve Jobs again, right, put a capacitive touchscreen onto a phone, and then we could put a finger onto glass and interact with digital content. What's happening now is the XR industry has been right moving forward, right? Let's not ignore all of this effort that's gone on for probably two decades now, but we do believe we're reaching an inflection point, and the reason is because now we can have hand-based interactions in the 3D realm. It's because of the hand tracking provided by the headsets. We don't need controllers with joysticks and buttons anymore, and it provides a intuitive and seamless interaction modality. It's the equivalent to a mouse with a PC and a touch screen on a phone, and that will drive adoption. It will drive we think it will be this inflection point that spatial computing has been lacking for a long time. And but of course the biggest need or demand is the sense of touch. The neuroscience is very clear. We have great papers for everyone here to read about multi-sensory integration and how tactile information, right, is received by the brain, the way it's processed faster than vision, the way that it creates a full experience, right? It applies to embodiment, it applies to ownership, it applies to agency, it applies to a lot of these ideas that are subconscious in a lot of our experiences, but wildly important to have a seamless interaction in our world. When we move people from the physical to the digital realm, the brain still needs that information and needs to be delivered with high fidelity. Our dream, our vision for Afference is that we will be building wearables, right? That are in form factors that you and I can enjoy in a transparent and seamless manner. It's not complicated. It's rings, it's watches, it's things that our anatomy isn't going to change over the next 10 years. It's going to be in those shapes and form factors. But what it allows is for digital interaction in 3D realms that is closer to what you expect from the physical. And we don't argue for replacement. It will not, right? It won't feel like this table. It won't have weight like this coffee cup, but it will get us close enough so that your brain can be dexterous. You can maneuver in those spaces seamlessly, and it's like the same techniques we learned with a mobile phone. You pinch and zoom like this. You click and select like that, and what we know is that we can get 80% of the way there with visual and audio information. We believe our form factors and our technology will solve for the last 20%, and we become infrastructure to this age of spatial computing.
I think the thing that's interesting about all this is when as we achieve what our vision is, as Jacob highlighted, is when we achieve this ubiquitous thing, like I wear it every day, then the beauty of all that is that ultimately the entire world is now haptic to you. And so when we think about the way and the patents that people are designing, like how do I make the touchscreen vibrate? It's all about how the physical piece you're building is changing. And the challenge with that is that every physical piece has to build the haptics into it, which is a harder model, right? I mean, we know the value of software as sort of the base layer of things. And if you're wearing like headphones or you're wearing a ring or something that's part of where you're at, it just simply takes an app, right? I mean, every device now is haptic. And that's a powerful situation. And it allows us to open up not specific apps developed for haptics or for this very niche area sometimes, but really allows us to rethink how people interact with their devices, with each other, and ultimately, you mentioned medical. Telehealth is a nice word, but it's basically what we're doing right here, looking at each other on a screen and talking. It's not really health if you ask most of the people I know in healthcare. They want to have laying of hands, right? They want to actually be able to interact with the individual. And so if we can add haptics at a distance, right? Touch at a distance where you can be wearing this as a ring, like you wear your stethoscope or something, it becomes another tool to directly touch. And The beauty of that even is, sort of thinking the medical vision space is, imagine ultrasound now being your tool. So your stethoscope, but you feel the fetus deep inside the mom or something like that. We could actually replace not just surface touch, but you can start to think about deep touch and a whole bunch of other ways that we can reimagine what that looks like. And so I mean, there's everything from the medical realm. There's training, what surgeons feel that resident can feel the surgeon doing surgery now, not just see it happen. And so there's a whole bunch of ideas we thought there. You can think about even driving cars, et cetera, or, navigating space. Right now, when you see a warning system or the LiDAR picks something up, right, it becomes an audio or a visual cue to you, or maybe the wheel of the steering wheel shakes. We know from our work in the research and in haptics that the tactile information is processed hundreds of milliseconds faster than visual, right? And so now you can imagine where that information is given to you 100 milliseconds quicker than the visual display, and it's simpler than vibrating the wheel because I can put different haptic information for different signals, right? So somebody coming from the front, I feel it in my right hand. From the left, I feel it in my left hand. And those can be life-saving differences of time, right? I mean, so there's a whole plethora of things that, to our basic premise at Afference is we need to make the technology usable every day by everybody. That's the core piece that I think sets apart what we're doing. And then after that, the apps are like all out there, right? I mean, there's all, and frankly, just like I was talking about the artists earlier, we want to give the tools to the individuals, again, smarter than us to come up with the applications. And that's a key point to get into where everybody can start to dream. I mean, you look what happened to the App Store and the Apple and everything else, right? Who do I want to, who wants a calendar on their phone? That's stupid. But now we use it for everything because people are creative, right? We want to open up that potential for people to be able to dream up the haptic applications.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so true. And it's a brilliant example, actually. And I think one of the things about the haptic space, I think that's been kind of constant is the need for like quality content. And that's kind
Hmm.
of been one of these like chicken and the egg things, where it's like you've got this badass tech, you don't have content, you'd lose. Like you've got
Hmm.
cool experiences, but like tech's not great. You kind of like it's a loss. I'd love to hear more about your kind of goal and vision for creating content. Like this is a tool. Like your first version's a tool. It's a dev kit. How are people going to be able to interact with it? Is it going to be easy to create content? Is this like what does that look like for the users who are super excited to be able to play with it?
Yeah, sure. So what we're planning on in this near term, call it the calendar year 2024, is to have development kits ready for content developers. That's in gaming, virtual training, all those areas, as well as an SDK so that you can you can either work with your own existing content or build with us to dream up your own. So it's the those are our first offerings. We're partnering with, we have an early partnership program that we launched at CES in January, and we're taking in those first collaborations. And what we'll say is that we're starting with like low hanging fruit. So just the ability to click a button, a three dimensional button in 3D space, is meaningful and can augment what users are experiencing today. Maybe some of us have tried the Apple Vision Pro, launched whatever a month or so ago. It is an entirely new digital interaction paradigm. It's using eye tracking, it's using gestures, and you are reliant upon visual and audio information to navigate alone. We can't feel anything anymore. There's passive interactions of your fingers coming together, but there's no digital confirmation of anything that's going on. And so we see a lot of opportunity for just these first partnerships, first applications, and first content to augment the simplistic interactions that are seemingly boring, right? It's the click of a button, it's the confirmation that you've selected an object, right? It's the identification of where your eyes are in space. It's the turning of a dial. It's the experiences that are friction full today because three dimensional interactions are numb. You can't feel them, and to be honest, those are some of the simplest haptic experiences that we could provide, and we can do it well today. So we that would be where when we're talking with early partners, that's where we're going to hone in and start. That's where the first content development will be. When we have Dustin has a manifesto. It's pages. and it's all cool, great neuroscience of how do we start creating new and different sensations like you're hearing about today. We need time and energy to pursue those ideas, and then we can get further into other, call it other more content with richer experiences from just the button click, right? So it'll be a stepwise process for us, but hopefully that gives everyone a sense for where we are today.
Well, and I think too the thing about this is a lot of this technology starts with the most complex you can think of, like how cool it's going to be if we have a completely virtual world that's, seamless. That's a huge ecosystem to create, right? I mean, that's almost too daunting, and places like Meta maybe can take it on and they have the budgets for that. But what's interesting to me is if you look at most of these technologies, they come down to what is the day use is what brings them into the mass market, right? And so I think the other, what Jacob was talking about is like, what are the simplest things that can become valuable, right? So how do we get it out and available to people? And, even around this idea of as Jacob was showing there in the Apple, for those that don't know, you do this little pinch thing, right? I mean, when I played with this, you can see what you're looking at, but you're not sure you're on the button, and then you click, and then you don't know. But if I could feel the squeeze of the button, right? So I can feel it as I start to squeeze down or something, that would add to that value. But the other thing that I think is important to understand about haptics, and particularly the value proposition that I believe haptics in general and what we're trying to bring, is that everybody thinks about the perception of haptics. I felt my finger touch something. But, one of the big challenges, for example, if you ever typed on a virtual keyboard, it's miserable. And most of that is because, in our opinion, and if you look at the neuroscience, typing is a task that actually happens at lower level. You're pre-programming your finger movement. Your brain is working ahead of that. It's not actually waiting for the click, not perceptual click. It's processing the click at sub levels, right? Pre-perceptual levels. And so while I can look at a keyboard and see my finger, I have to go so much slower because the brain is waiting for the touch and it never comes. And so that discrepancy between the visual and the expectation and all these things relate to that discomfort and also slows you down. And so even things that aren't like I felt the key, that's not the critical part. The critical part is that you felt the key and it was processed before you felt it. And so little things like that, even though they don't result in this big wow of haptics, they result in the important functional gains, the things that make it feel real, that make me enable me to type faster, to button click with more precision. All these things make the experience better. They're not the wow factor, but they make them better, right? They're that last 20% we've talked about. And there's one thing to be able to type because I can see it. It's know that it feels right. And people like Apple and these companies that really at this level, they focus on that 20%. And we think that's a critical thing for these experiences to bring, but they have to come at the 20% that isn't 90% of effort, right? And so this is where reducing the friction to gain that thing, to use a phrase that I've heard for Apple and others, is it just works. And that's one of the things we'd like to be able to achieve, is it just works.
That's awesome. That's so true. Yeah, it's like you can't mess it up. You turn it on, it guides you through it. It's seamless. It's an experience that's kind of like chanting, like the sounds, the
Hmm.
feeling. I love that. That's what, every kind of like product person, it's like their end goal is that they're trying to achieve. So that's fantastic that you guys are going for that, because I think with new kind of technologies, there's this like risk of like it does so much that it's so hard to explain and educate people. Like, what are some of your guideposts in terms of like how to educate people? What are the things that you've kind of tried to narrow into to help people understand? Like, you've kind of gone through the pitch, but I just want to know more about um, just aiming people at like the things that this is really critical about, the things that this could benefit them of, like going back to like the daily use case.
Yeah, good. The when as we talk with partners and try to make sure we're providing value to everyone we're working with, right? The things they care about, right, are the the way in which it enhances their experiences. So that some of that could be functional. That the virtual training has more realism, so that the educational value goes up. Right. That's one. I think a lot of the guests on this show have those, can provide those capabilities too. We specialize, right, when there's physical and virtual objects interacting, right? Because you can, with our wearables, you can move between the digital realm and the physical realm seamlessly. So a lot of we fit into that. We fit into that need. Another one is that there's we argue for the phrase we use is digital dexterity. That means that you could be moving through 3D menus, operations, buttons, clicks, with the same dexterity that we expect. This goes, to Dustin's keyboard example. It's when we have interfaces that are based on hand tracking, and that demand, a lot of this is in the augmented reality realm, or now mixed reality realm with the way our headsets are being built. It's then all of a sudden people can work in those interfaces for longer. You maintain time of use. You increase time of use, for which is meaningful to, right, game creators or content creators at large. Then we can also argue, as the haptic information is slowly being introduced, that we can also differentiate spatial computing apps that have haptic experiences versus not, and we can drive traffic to those applications versus their competitors. So it's the equivalent. Everyone, maybe you can imagine that feeling of when you press the flashlight button on an iPhone. It goes doo doo, right? It's just enough information, right? But it's magical. And then exactly what's happening. The flashlight turns on. You know what to do. When If you can imagine apps on a equivalent screen, and some click and some don't, we think we're going to be able to drive traffic to content creators because of it. And those are the initial value. Those are the initial piece of value that we're trying to bring to the market.
Oh, that was such a beautiful example. I think everyone who has an iPhone was just like, "Yep, I get it. I fully get it with the light mode." That's fantastic. Yeah, just that small nuance makes such a big difference in terms of the experience. Like if it wasn't there, it's like fine, but it just adds to it. It's I turned it on. I'm interacting with it. It's speaking to me. So cool. I love that so much. One thing I want to touch upon that you were speaking to a little bit was just like the actual experience for a user, because like a lot of technologies, the trouble with gloves is it's like one size fits all, but whether you've got small hands, you've got big hands, it's actually like a huge issue. It's a problem. Like you have to wear like six gloves to fit into the one glove. I've said too much about someone else's product. But tell us a little bit about like yours, like it that fits around the finger, and like the wrist position. Tell us about the positioning and fit.
Sure. We Today, right, we have sizes too: small, medium, large. There's nothing dramatically different between them except the rings themselves. And so our sizing is not dependent upon your entire hand. It's dependent upon finger sizes. And you can imagine, as you buy if you've ever found rings that fit your fingers, um, one, your fingers are all different sizes, and two, your fingers change sizes throughout the day, right? That's why a solid ring, a gold ring, fits whatever loosely in the morning, and then by the end of a hot summer day, it's stuck on your finger. And so what we've done is created, right, rings that are compliant. They allow, for those of you on YouTube, right, can see sort of these compliant um, springs, call it passive springs, that we've designed into the ring so that it can fit your fingers throughout the day. And what we would do is essentially just we would a user of our system would choose the size, small, medium, large, based on their overall hand, and then the compliance of the rings would fit across different your fingers, as they change throughout the day, or as your finger sizes changes over your hand. That's what we do today. What I will say is that we're actually moving the consumer facing products that we're envisioning. They're not here today. They're in the future. Would be, rings and watches that you and I wear, every day, and we can imagine how those are sized. Watches have a watch band, right, that is sized to your wrist, and then rings are solid sizing that is fit to you, depending on the finger you're wearing it. So those are like we'll get there in the future as well. It's the what you should know, right, is that this is the fit is actually remarkably enjoyable, right? I wear this. Those of you watching, holding my hand up to the screen. I'm picking up a pencil. I'm drinking my coffee, and I can type on a physical keyboard as quickly as I ever need to. This is what we mean by a transparent device. I'm not constrained within it, so that I can work in both the digital and physical realms. And the rings, the wearable is very light. I'm not um, there's a right this the what's on my wrist is it looks like a smartwatch. It has the weight of about a what like a an AirPod case, something like this. It's a lightweight package on my wrist, and then rings on my fingers. And so it's a remarkably comfortable system to wear, and that's why we consider it transparent um, to the user. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, the form factor is super cool. It definitely looks like you just keep something on your hands and you don't have to worry about it. It's not restricting or like you're not tied to something. You're not gonna like trip and fall, break a cable, which is really cool. So that's a form factor I'm sure many people will appreciate. Before we jump into the future, because you've said so many things that are getting me excited about talking about the future, Jacob. So stop it right now. Of where you guys are headed. I wanted to cover something that is really important for our guests, or sorry, for our audience, which is challenges. Because like every company that is in haptics, every company in existence has faced challenges, whether it's just getting the company started, it's running a team, whether it's the technology itself. Well, everyone faces issues with technology itself. There's always kind of like hurdles that you face. I'd love to hear from you guys as the co-founders of some of your key challenges and things that our audience could learn, from you guys to save themselves or just as a something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so I guess Jacob pointed to me there, so I'll he deferred the hard question, and Ashley, come on, this is rough. um,
He's next. He's next.
yeah, fair enough. So here's I mean, I guess from the technical perspective, I can put one side on that, which is that, how we activate the nerve, because we are electrical, right? So we're not pushing on your skin. And in our case, that means we have to be more sophisticated in the technology and how we actually produce it. So we're not claiming and we're not getting to the point of like a 2-point discrimination so that our other companies are pushing high pixel density on your finger, all that stuff. We're probably not going to achieve that from our perspective. And then the other thing is, if we think about what touch is actually made up of, there's kind of 4 dimensions when we think about it. There's the um, where you feel it, so that's the density of things, and we can get to the finger, we can get to the side of the finger, we get multiple positions on the finger, but we can't get to 2-point discrimination. Then there's the intensity, which we can do really well. I mean, you can get a light feel to a heavy pinch. You can feel, in fact, we can get very strong sensations, which are challenged with some of the physical devices that people have. And then there's the adaptive nature. So sensation, if you touch and feel something, it'll essentially adapt out, right? And in some ways, that's a good thing, but we have that. And so we have to kind of manage how that's going to be. And the last one that people often think about, but is a challenge, is the quality. Like, what does it feel like? And right now, we're using a very crude protocol. I talked about all those knobs earlier. We don't turn any of them right now. And so we can do quality, we can do intensity really well. The next step in what the manifesto, as Jacob described earlier, is how we get to different qualities. And there's an interesting interplay between what our brain does and the information we provide it. And so there's a fair amount of both the neuroscience side that we're going to have to continue to develop, and then as well as the giving the tools to develop it, right? And so the challenge there is creating, I mean, that's a long way of getting at what the challenge is the user experience, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's trying to create a user experience that has value. And I think the challenge in haptics right now, at least as I see it, is defining the value proposition, right? I mean, we get this, you asked it earlier, what's our use case, all this kind of stuff. These are certainly important questions, and people often think of haptics as touching like just like I am now, right? If I grab a coffee cup, right, and I grab hold of it, I should feel exactly the same way. But haptics is a more oh, and then the other thing I'll say with that is we get the question all the time is, well, what can you do different now that you couldn't do before? And it's a harder question to answer. That haptics is not the same kind of like in your face, I can see this artificial world. It's a much more subtle impact. And so when we try to give a demo and people want to see the value in 5 seconds, it's hard to convey that, right? It's like, it's going to be something where You use it for a day and you'll miss it when you don't have it. So trying to convey the value of it is tricky when you got 5 minutes to somebody that's never experienced it before, right? And then, we know with haptics and the brain perspective, the visual tactile synchrony, when I grab something, if I'm providing an information content, that becomes the natural. It doesn't happen right away. And so I think haptics suffers or is challenged. I shouldn't say suffers, but the challenge is that aha moment, that thing that people go, oh, I need this device, right? Because it's either something that's an aha moment, but nobody's ever going to use. So you get this really cool sensation, but when you go like, why do I care? Nobody cares. Or the way we use sensation is something you don't really think about until you don't have it, right? I mean, and this is one of the things we got from prosthetic users all the time is that you and I have touch. We never think about the absence of it. And then when you don't have it, it's suddenly a big gap in your life. I mean, people talk about being incomplete all the time when they lose a limb. And it's really that connection of touch that goes away. And so it's not that it was a big thing, but it's when it's gone, it was a huge thing because it was just part of who you were, right? And the other thing, the other examples I give on this that we don't, for people that haven't lost a limb to understand the lack of sensations, if you've ever gone and got dental work and they numb your jaw completely, when you walk out, it feels like your jaw is like yay big. It's not changed, but what's happened is you don't have that sensory input from the air touching your skin anymore. And so that lack of haptic input, the things we take for granted, we never think about, changes our experience completely. And so haptics is super important for our experience, but it's not something that's like we know every day. We don't think about it. And so I think the challenge in haptics is defining that use case and showing it to people in a way that they can get in the first 5 seconds. So, over time it's valuable, but how do you get over that hump? And that's where we think the friction to the user is critical, right? If it's going to take me a couple days of using it to feel it, and it's I got to put on a headset, I got to put in a big glove, I got to wear it all the time. I think people give up too quickly on that, right? And so we're constantly facing this challenge, I believe, of why do I care about this? And then how do you make it easy for people to get there? I think that's the haptics field as a whole. And I think we can look across a lot of the companies that are trying to define that. And it's sort of, that's the problem they run into, I believe.
Wow, Justin's coming in hot with the examples. Coming in hot with the examples. That was fantastic. That was very tactile way to describe it, so I appreciate that. And unfortunately, Jacob, we're running low on time, so I'm gonna have to move on to the next section. But I'm gonna start with you. So we're gonna move on to the future of haptics, and this is my favorite section because I think this we'll touch upon it from your company perspective, because I think you talked about a lot of really cool things that you're working on. That I'm picturing like the Santa list of all these cool technologies that everyone is gonna be excited about. So let's start there, and then we'll move on to more like your personal opinion on the haptics industry. So where is Afference headed? Like you mentioned, quite a few different consumer products, like watch, wrist, ring. Is there like a estimated timeline for these? Are these things that that people can like get excited about soonish? Like as a someone who wants it, I'm asking. That's really what I'm asking.
I hear you, Ashley. We will make it. We will make it happen for you as soon as possible, and for all the listeners as well soon thereafter. Let's see. We have core development going on. That means we're pushing. Right. We are coming out of left field here, meaning your guests, the folks who listen to this podcast have seen haptics for a lot longer. Well, for a long time, and we're bringing some sort of new and different ideas to the table here, as you may have noticed in this last hour. So it will take us some time to get there so that it's ready for consumer use and can be widely distributed. I'm mapping it out. 2026, we have ideas for consumer facing wearables. Usually it'll be small launches for haptic, call it enthusiasts. But yeah, that's what we're looking at there to the in terms of when we're facing consumer when we're turning this company to become consumer facing. But then if I can dream for a minute, is that okay? What we think is happening here is that we're being taught by big tech companies producing new platforms in spatial computing. We're being taught how to interact with digital content in a new way again. The opportunity here for the entire haptics industry, it's not Afference specific, is that it presents new challenges. You're moving through air, you're interacting with 3D content instead of two-dimensional physical objects. And what I get most excited about is creating technology that lets you that blurs these lines between the digital realm and the physical. And so then all of a sudden we can augment our lives. The framing is a heads down world. That's me staring at my cell phone, walking into a street light as I head down the sidewalk, right? Versus a heads up world where my digital content is still there. I'm still going to need directions because I don't know my way around anymore. And I'm still going to need my text messages to arrive like this, or else my wife will not be happy. So then it's the digital content will be there, but it'll be displayed in a heads up manner, and you're gonna have a new digital pairing where you have some head worn system as well as a wearable. We argue it'll be a haptic wearable. It'll be on your ring or it'll be on your watch, and it will complete that circle. That's the dream that we have. We think the form factors will need to be like we've been describing, and we think we're trying to build out that infrastructure to provide it to the masses. We hope for your patience because it's not an easy problem. But I think we feel like we have the underlying know-how and abilities, and we're going to do it as fast as we can for everyone here.
All right, you heard it here, folks. And I'm gonna set an alert in my calendar. And Jacob, I'll be the first person to be. It's gonna come up in my calendar. I'll be like, Jacob, 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 if I don't hear by then. But I have a feeling I will, because you guys are just working aggressively on some really innovative stuff. So love that so much. So thank you for sharing that. In terms of the future of haptics as a whole industry, I would love to know. Starting with you, Dustin, what do you think the haptics industry is going to look like, or do you hope it looks like in the next, say, like 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, what I hope it looks like and what I think we can get to is, I kind of said it earlier, everybody, it's funny now how I walk around, everybody's wearing earbuds. People have audio all the time there. I'd like to have the same vision for haptics, right? Everybody just is haptically connected because what that does, like I say, haptics or touch is connection. It brings us together, right? It brings us bigger. And I don't want it to be a novelty that maybe one person has somewhere. I want everybody to have it. Just like we all have headphones, we put them in, we connect to the audio. I want you to be, I mean, in a visual world, I want to do this call where a mother and daughter can hold their hands, right? Or I could visit my grandmother across the country without flying there because I could hold her hand, right? I mean, this idea where we can connect. That's the vision for me in the future. I mean, it'll be in the virtual world, it'll be in these things, but it's about connection. And, I think we're going through an interesting time in tech where it's, as I said earlier, it's done a lot to bring us together. You and I are talking, you're in Toronto, I'm here in Cleveland, Jake's in Colorado. This is awesome. But if I have somebody here in Cleveland with me, this is not awesome, right? Because I can't connect. How can we bring all this together and connect us? And that's what I see the future as, is haptics being ubiquitous. It's being everybody has it. It's a normal part of things, and it connects us to each other and to other things in both the virtual and the real world.
Awesome, love that. Jacob, how about you? 10 years, 15 years, what's it look?
My what I imagine is this idea of embodiment. So you're we're going to be interacting more and more in 3D space. It's it's strange today. It's unusual because your brain isn't getting everything it gets from the physical realm. But as we close that gap, it'll feel more. You can become more and more embodied in the virtual realm. I Ready Player One, Westworld. Those ideas I actually don't. It doesn't. I don't actually like them. I usually fall asleep in those movies. But where it does benefit us is that we can again have better and better. We can have more seamless interactions because the digital realm is powerful, right? It's far more customizable. It's far more right adaptable compared to these 2D screens that we use today. But if we can embody those spaces by providing tactile and visual information together, we're gonna we're gonna have this seamless world, and it will provide a lot of value. We're gonna build this infrastructure, right? Afference is, like the name suggests, we care about the sensory information coming to the brain. A lot of other people are going to build out the use cases. That means gaming, training, healthcare, and the rest. Um, but I'm hopeful. I'm dreaming and optimistic to that when we can allow people to be embodied, and feel comfortable in that virtual space, that there's value to be created across a wide swath of our lives and of industry.
Yeah, if I could just add to this, Ashley, for just a second. Like right now, we bound ourselves by our skin. We take the sense of where we exist as our skin because that's where we touch the world. But imagine where that skin is no longer our limit because we can touch far away from us. We can touch anywhere else. So essentially, we're unbounding the human from its skin in some ways. And so we're amplifying the human's ability to be in different places. We're amplifying the human's ability. That's the now my grandiose outside of, but in a company you're supposed to focus, but I put my academic hat on for a minute. I mean, we want to expand our existence beyond our skin and amplify the human capability. That's the grand picture of all of this, I think.
Ooh, love it. Love that, guys. That was awesome. You're gonna have new fans for sure listening to this. I'd love for you to just reiterate where they can find you, like website, where on socials. How do they learn more about you?
Yeah, good. We're Afference, AFFERENCE.io is our website. Of course, contact page there to get in touch with both of us. LinkedIn, Twitter is all connected through there as well. And no, we what I'll say is that we've learned a lot from your community. So the Haptics Club has been a encyclopedia for us. We're neuroscientists. We're coming out from over there, joining you all here, and it's been your work, Ashley, and the team at Haptics Club that's been a wonderful partner in us learning and growing as well. So thanks everyone for listening.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. We really appreciate it. We are really just a bunch of haptics nerds who come together, trying to share everything that we possibly can. There's so many amazing things happening in the haptic space, and just not enough time to talk about it, which actually brings this to a close. We've reached our end, unfortunately, and sadly, this is the end of this episode. But I really want to thank you guys for coming. I think this has been an incredible episode of just learning more about your vision for the future, your technology, some potential use cases, which I think is going to get people excited because the more people in the space, the different technologies we have, the merrier it is. So thanks, guys, for joining. Anyone who wants to check out our website, thehapticsclub.com. We've got our upcoming guests. We've got a really badass season. Obviously, look how we started with Afference. And of course, we've got a blog, we've got swag, we've got everything you need on our website. So check it out. And then for this episode, you're probably listening on either YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. That's where all of our episodes are. And of course, we really need to thank our listeners. I think our listeners have been such a huge support of us. They share questions, comments, and just general encouragement for the space. And we're just so grateful that our listeners are just cheering us on. Every message is just delightful. So we will see you at the next episode. Thanks, guys. Thanks again.